Welcome to the Rock is George podcast. I'm your host, George Dionne. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to hit like, follow, or subscribe on the platform that you're listening to us on. You can also check out my work at the loudest.com on the planet, knac.com, for exclusive hard rock and heavy metal interviews, live show coverage, album reviews, and more. My guests for episode 175 are vocalist David Rock Feinstein and drummer Carl Canedy of the hard rock and heavy metal act, The Rods. The Rods have a brand new album coming out on January 19th called Rattle the Cage through Massacre Records. Every band says their newest album is their best one, but I kind of have to agree, this album's pretty damn good. The Rods is celebrating their 45th anniversary going into 2024. And here's David and Carl to tell you more about it. I'll start with you, David. If I knew absolutely nothing about the Rods, how would you describe the band's music to me?
Describe the Rods? Actually, it's kind of like a three-ring circus. And, it's been that way because right from the beginning, my take on it was, and I think Carl can attest to this also, that, because we're just a trio and we do what we, the music that we play is like what we feel, it's like, my playing is pretty much one-dimensional, as far as like my thoughts and guitar, people have influenced me on guitar and stuff. On the other hand, Carl's a little bit more, he can cover some different things, as far as music goes, but we've always taken ourselves as being a trio where we can have freedom to play, in other words, if I write a song or Carl writes a song, when we work the song out, there's really, unless it's something that really bothers us when we go through the song, we probably don't put any limitations on, what we can do, because we want each individual in the band to show, what they can do. And, unlike some other bands where there's a leader in the band that says, you're going to play this part and this is the way it goes, and no matter what, so we pretty much have a free range, of playing when we put a song together and live, of course. It is kind of like it, or it has been. We're a little bit older now, so it's not so much a three-ring circus anymore, but it still is kind of a circus.
I've read the Rods compared to as the American Motorhead. Is that a fair comparison?
I think it's a really fair comparison, but we had never heard Motorhead. We only heard of Motorhead when our first album came out, and I believe Sounds Sounds magazine in England, in the UK, said that we were like the American Motorheads, and they kind of gave us that title. But prior to that, we hadn't heard Motorhead. But I think we came out of, our influences, David's influences, my influences are very similar. And I think when we, like David said, when we approach a song, we approach it as a trio. So there's a lot of energy, and we try to infuse our own thoughts and ideas into the songs that within the context of that song. And also we came out of there was a big punk era that was happening at the time. Disco was dying, and we were kind of influenced by the fact that our energy was, kind of punkish in terms of we were balls to the walls from day one. Like we were always on the edge, like going for it all the time. And I think that's what gave us the edge initially live. And that's where the three-ring circus came from, was just we were all over the place. David and Gary were just all over the stage. And, my daughter, I played a video for her when she was little. We were at the Beacon Theater, I think opening for Twisted Sister. And my daughter looked at it and she said, it's two mops and a gorilla watching us on stage. And it was a very apt description of us. So I think that, that's really true what David said. We definitely bring our parts, we bring our influences to the music. We work within the confines of the song structure, but there's always been an edge to the Rods. You hear it on the new album, you hear it from the first album. There's always an edge that we're just pushing and always there, just kind of going for the energy. That whole vibe and that feel is what's important to us, as well as, of course, crafting of songs, which I think David has done the last two albums, with the exception of some lyric contributions from me. And I think I wrote 1982 on Brotherhood, but on this album, David's whole approach lyrically has changed, and melodically his vocal approach His guitar solos have always been inspirational and phenomenal. He's always gone for the solos that are just so unique. And but I think he's really kicked up the game on this album, and I'm really proud of it. I'm proud of him.
I would have to absolutely agree with that. And, you know, every band says their latest album is their best album, but I, as an outsider, I got to agree this might be your best album. Rattle the Cage. It comes out on January 19th through Massacre Records. I'm pretty sure everybody's looking at this in a positive light as far as critics and fans alike. David, what do you think about that?
I think you're absolutely right. And I thank Carl for the compliments, you know, but I think the band has, you know, matured, you know, over the years. And, you know, in the old days, I said the old days, when, you know, it was more like, and there was that punk influence of singing about, all the songs were written about, you know, rock and roll and, you know, partying and that kind of thing. So now it's more serious, you know, and I think that in my writing, you know, I want it to be a good message, you know, I want it to be a positive message. You know, there's too much going on in the world that's negative, you know, like, I mean, just look at the news every day. Everything is like, people are getting killed. People, you know, there's every aspect of it seems like of life is negative, you know. So now, you know, I've taken the approach that I don't want to project any negativity in the music that we do and the songs that I write. I want it to be positive, you know. I still want people to have a good time. I want them to rock and roll, and I want it to be heavy. I want it to be strong, but I definitely think this is, you know, the best album we've done through the years, you know, and I'm just hoping that everybody else feels the same way about it. We're getting a lot of good feedback from people that have heard it.
I have to say that I've gotten great feedback too. Everybody really thinks it's one of our best albums ever, if not the best album. And I think there are a lot of elements. I think what David just said about his songwriting, changing a more positive approach. I think he's really focused on his vocals. His vocals have never been better. And like I said, his songwriting has never been better. But also we have the other elements that Freddie being, you know, joining the band. Freddie and I play so well together, and Freddie brought a whole different thing to us sonically. And his whole bass sound, Gary's bass sound was always mid-rangey. That's what he liked. That's what he wanted. But it was never that full sound that captured live. Now, Gary's sound live was never mid-range. It was very bottomy. But for some reason, recordings, that's what he pushed for. With Freddie's got that Black Sabbath, Geezer Butler bass sound. He and I work well together. The Thunder Twins, you know, we're really worked well, and I'm really thrilled to be playing with Freddie. So sonically, the band is the songwriting is different. As David said, maturing, which, you know, when I say mature, I don't mean old. I just mean more mature. But sonically, there are a lot of elements that came into play to make this album what it is. And Chris Collier has been a huge part of it. We worked with him on Brotherhood of Metal. He definitely understands the band, and I think he captures the band, what we sound like live. And now we have it on a recording, which we never really had that sonic capture of what the band's like live in a recording studio, which we have now. So all those elements came into play on this, and I think that's why I believe it's our best album since the first. And the other thing that fans have said, which I love this, some bands probably take it as maybe not the best thing, but for me, I take it as the best thing possible, best compliment. And that is that if you bought the first album and you liked it, you would love this. You would love this album. It's not like we chased a trend. The rods are the rods. We do what we do. Like David said, you know, one dimensional, but one dimensional maybe sounds negative, but it's not. It's like Pete Townsend of The Who. He writes a certain way. There's a signature, and it's phenomenal. And I think that's what we have with this. David writes a certain way, and I also try to write in that vein as well. But I think David's really kicked it up a notch, and I think all these elements came to play, and I'm really thrilled about it.
One of the singles you have out ahead of the album is Rattle the Cage. If David, you want to talk a little bit about where you were coming from lyrically with this song?
That particular song, Carl either called me or sent me a message and said, I got a great title for a song. So what is it? To Rattle the Cage. I said, it's great, you know. I mean, at the time, we didn't really think about it being the title of the album, but it was a great title, you know. So and he sent some, some lyric ideas too, and so I'm trying to put together, with every song that I work on, I try to create some kind of like, or where can I go with this? Like what's it going to be of, what's the concept of like where this is going to go and what it's going to mean. And, in some of Carl's lyrics that he sent, I got the feeling for that as to where it should go. In the early years, it's basically, let's write a song, and if it rhymes, then it works, and let everybody else figure it out, but I don't want to do that anymore, and I didn't want to do it with us. I didn't want to do it with any songs. I want it to go to be something, that means something. So with Carl's inspiration as far as the lyric ideas that he gave me and the title, I was able to kind of put together that with musically, where it should go, with the track. I wanted it to be heavy. I wanted it to be something that was, that gave us our identity, because we do have an identity. And it just came out to be something really good, in the end. And we thought, well, geez, what a great title for the album. And that just kind of like came together automatically.
And it's really struck a nerve with a lot of people, the lyrics and the song. People, we all feel that same, like the lyrics David wrote about. Everybody feels that rage, that just all the things we have to, the have tos in life. And sometimes, you got to scream. You feel like screaming, and sometimes you just got to shake it up. It seems like it's really connected with people.
Absolutely. You guys released a second song as well, Shockwave, which I thought was going to be the title of the album at one time. If you want to talk a little bit about Shockwave, David.
You're right about that. I think we did decide that Shockwave came up as a title, and thought, oh, what a great title. That, in the beginning for me, was like, how can I construct a song around the title Shockwave? It was really difficult for me at first, because I just didn't figure out how to go about doing it, and I think Carl might have sent me some lyric ideas also, to get me started. But that song was a little, musically, when I get an idea for a song and a title, I can come up with a track or a riff that's pretty easily. But coming up with a concept, to putting the lyrics together to make it go along with it, is sometimes more difficult. Some songs come together very quickly, lyrically and musically. Other songs come together quickly and musically, more difficult lyrically, if you're really, trying to structure something that means something in the song, rather than just let's get words that rhyme together. So, that song turned out different. It's a different song for us. It's right in our vein. It's right in our style, but it is slightly different. And I think it came out really well.
When I first heard the riff, I was like, wow, this is different. David wrote something a little bit different, and I loved it. And I love the vibe of that song.
Carl, you mentioned that, it was important to capture what the rods sound like live in this particular album. Did you guys actually go into the studio, or was this more of a remote thing?
This was very much remote. But we've been doing this, in defense of remote, which everybody records remotely. And if they don't record remotely, they go into a room and they record, and then they just totally rip it apart and beat detective everything and put it on the grid. And, at the end of the day, it's is what it is. So, but yes, no, we have been recording remotely for forever, really. Very seldom do we make it into the studio, and that's budget constraints. There's just not enough money to get together and go into the studio without breaking the bank. But I think over time, we've become very experienced. Obviously, all these years of recording, knowing each other's playing, I think, is the other key piece of that. And I think that makes the remote recording work for us in terms of capturing that live feel, because we're used to it, and we know how to make it work for us. And also, what I do is I tell everyone, all of my drum tracks, whether it's the rods or anyone, early on with digital recording, I had really horrible experiences with people moving my drum tracks, and suddenly I'm like, wait, I didn't play that. That feel's gone. I tell everyone now, I send them WAV files that are zeroed from the beginning to the end. That's my drum track. Don't change it. If you don't like it, something's wrong. I'll replay it. But don't start screwing with, oh, I'm going to move this a little bit and move that, because that sucks. I think that contributes to us having that, capturing that feel, because the drum tracks are live and everyone's playing to that. But, you know, our method right now, the way it works, is working very well for us.
This is the first album featuring your new bassist, Freddie Villano. David, what did, besides the tone change Carl mentioned earlier, David, what did Freddie bring to the recording process here, or live? What does he bring to the band live too?
Aside from the fact that he's under 5'5", you know, is a great aspect. You know, when Gary decided to retire, you know, it was really, for Carl and I, you know, it was a big question mark right there. You know, like, what do we do? I mean, it's been a lot of, Gary's been in the band, established the identity of the band, done a lot of recording with them in live shows. You know, what do we do? Do we continue on? Do we try to replace Gary, which you know, is not an easy thing to do, especially live, as live performances are exceptional. You know, he was a great bass player all the way around, good singer. So we had to make the decision. Do we cash it in too? You know, do we say that we've done it enough years, we're done, we go on to other projects or do whatever? Do we try to replace Gary? Do we try to restructure the band into something different, add a singer, add a keyboard player, add, you know, whatever, which we decided against after some time because we wanted to keep our identity. You know, we had built this identity up over, you know, 40 years. So we would decide to keep it the same. Well, Freddie was a person that we both knew, and he was in the area, you know, and we said, you know, we decided Freddie would be a great bass player in the band, you know. So we approached him about it, and he just, you know, he jumped at the idea. He loved it, you know. And Freddie, come to find out, Freddie was a big fan of the Rods. And Freddie is a few years younger than Carl and I, so he was a big fan of the Rods from the beginning. So for him, this was like, you know, and these are his words coming, you know, it was a big, you know, thrill for him to join the band. So, you know, as soon as we had the first rehearsal with him and I started showing him, you know, the songs and stuff, it was just an incredible sound and a good presence, you know, because he's not only a great bass player, a great musician, you know, he's a great person, you know, he's a great person. And that's, you know, that's important because it doesn't matter how good you are, you know, if you can't get along with a person and it's not a good person, it's not, you know, that's why bands break up, you know. I mean, phenomenal player, but can't get along with a guy, you know, for whatever reason. So Freddie is a great guy. He's a great bass player, a great musician, intelligent, knows a lot about everything, it seems. And it just worked out perfect for us, you know, because by him coming in, it did change the sound, like Carl said, you know, and he's very eager, you know, to like try things and do things and, you know, put his input in. So it was just a great move, you know, for Freddie to come into the band. It was a natural fit for all of us.
Yeah. And Freddie is a team player, and that was a big plus for us because we're no longer dealing with Gary was kind of disenchanted at some point, but Freddie is not. And Freddie and I played on David's album Hail or Farewell. We played live with Tom Collier's band Held Hostage. We did guest spots. So Freddie and I knew we played well together, and Freddie and David had done recordings together. So we kind of all knew it would work. But once we started playing, it was great. And can't say enough about him, but he's very positive, and he really is part of the team. He comes up with solutions, which is great to have that third person who's willing to be part of the band and work on things that you need, because it's not an easy venture. And we do we're definitely a DIY band when it comes to many, many things. So having him as part of the team, aside from on stage, and for me, the big plus is when we go on stage, I already know that David and I played together now in 2024. That'll be our 45th year together, which is unbelievable. But with Freddie, I already know that when David's on stage, I never think twice about him. He delivers every time. But with Freddie now, I'm so comfortable and confident with his playing and how he and I play well together that I'm ready to light up the minute we're on stage. I can't wait to count the first song off because I know it's going to be solid and it's going to be fun and we're going to kick ass. So can't say enough about him. What a plus it's been.
One of the staples of the Rods, I think, besides the music, is sort of your cover art. It's pretty legendary and recognizable, and this cover for the new album by Mark Rizzo is no different. This Three Wolves concept has kind of followed you guys throughout your 45 years. What is there something specific besides yourselves that the Three Wolves represent?
That's a good question. Not for me. I do know that we do have, although in the early days for the first album for Wild Dogs, when we would sign them, we would always say, because people would talk about Gary being the cute one in the band. So we'd always say, oh, Gary, you sign on the cute one. Now, of course, all three heads are pretty hideous, so it didn't really matter which one you signed on. But we would go, Gary, you should sign the cute one. But our friend, Brian Reevy, when told him the title of the album, he suggested that the Cerberus should be bursting out of a cage, the biting its way out of the cage, rattle the cage concept. And so Brian kind of gave us that idea. And Eric Philippe, who's been a longtime artist for, I don't know how many years now, 15, 16, 17. I know he did work with David on Third Wish and maybe other albums. But Eric was very busy, and this album had to come out, or it would not come out until August. So we were in a crunch. And Mark stepped up and David and I both had talked about we wanted a grittier cover, and Mark nailed it so quickly, came back with us with cover art, and we were able to deliver on time so that it'll be out January 19th as opposed to August, which we just couldn't afford the extra time. So Mark really nailed it and really delivered a killer cover, in my opinion.
You guys are going to be heading out on your 45th anniversary tour in 2024, also to promote the album. With first stop is Australia, with Ross the Boss, Anvil, and Butterfly. David, is this the Rod's first time in Australia?
Yeah, it is the first time. We're really looking forward to it too. And aside from the fact that we know the guys in Anvil and we know Ross the Boss pretty well, we got prior. I know Carl and Rob, the drummer in Anvil, are close friends, and they're in contact all the time, and Rob's a great guy. All the guys are great guys. So it's going to be a lot of fun to be on the road doing these. There's only 4 dates in Australia, but still, it's going to be great to be with these bands because we know them and we know they're all good guys, and Ross the Boss, Ross sat in with us when we played in Brooklyn. So there's a history there with us and these other bands. So yeah, it's our first time in Australia. We're really looking forward to it. Should be great.
Carl, does the tour continue beyond Australia?
We have quite a few regional dates right now that we're looking to nail down. We're going to have a band meeting possibly tomorrow, and we'll finalize some of these dates. And then we'll see where that goes. I'm looking at some dates in Europe as well for the summer. And, we're going to start booking now. And now that the album will be coming out, definitely we need to do some special things for the 45th anniversary. That's a big milestone.
Sometimes with these big milestones, bands call it a day, 45th anniversaries, 50th anniversaries. I know in particular, Kiss just called it a day, kind of. Is this the final run for the Rods, or do you see it going forward after this?
We actually have half of the next album. David's already written half of the next album and recorded majority of it. And plus, Kiss is able to call it a day now after the 45 years. We haven't gone to the bank enough, so we're not ready to retire. We have to go to the bank a little more before we can retire.
Yeah.
So there'll be no Rods. There'll be no Rods avatars, right, David?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I think Ronnie always said to me quite a while ago. Obviously before he died, Rock, you got to do it while you can. And it really stuck with me because being a musician is not something that's really easy to give up. And when these bands say it's their final tour, it really most of the time isn't. because it may not be it may be their final tour that they're going to go out for 3 or 4 months at a time, because as you get older, that road life gets more difficult. But you know, spot gigs here, go do this festival there, where you're playing in front of, you know, 20, 30,000 people, that's different. So to say it's the end is very difficult unless you really have a reason to prevent you from doing what you do, playing, singing, performing, or whatever, you know. So yeah, I think that we probably will keep going until it gets to a point where, you know, one of us can't do it anymore. We're not able to do it physically anymore, or whatever, you know. It's something that has to be taken into consideration, not only as you get older, because there's a lot of younger people that have problems, you know, physically and mentally, that prevent them from doing anything. But you know, it's not an easy. I think it probably looks easier from the outside than it does coming from the inside, because even to go play one show, there's a lot of preliminary stuff. There's rehearsals, there's preparation, there's crew, there's equipment, there's trucking, there's, you know, all this other stuff. So it's not an easy thing. And when you get older, it becomes more difficult. And you know, I write a song, and because I was a drummer in the beginning, you know, I've been with Carl long enough to know now that when I put something together, I can almost know, you know, when I'm writing the song, what he's going to play there. And I take it into consideration that I want him to be able to play things that are, you know, in his style and his character. And I know he's still capable of doing it. It's just like Ronnie was still capable of singing like a 20-year-old when he was in his 60s. And so Carl, you know, Carl still plays, you know, like he does, did when he was younger. So it's we just keep doing it until we can't do it anymore. I guess that's it, you know, until something solid really puts the brakes on us.
My daughter and we're all having dinner with my daughter and her husband, and my daughter's eating her food and her head's kind of down, focusing on eating. And her husband said to me, "So when do you think you'll retire from the band?" And without missing a beat, my daughter, and didn't look up, said, "Never." And that's really, like David said, you know, it's never. It's just the proverbial rock till you drop. And, you know, once you reach a point where you can no longer do it, then that's it. Then you call it a day. But in terms of saying, oh, well, when I reach a certain age, I'm going to stop, I don't think that's in the cards for us right now. Right now, we're really making music we love. David's writing better than ever. I'm back on my guitar and bass, working on riffs that I can contribute as well. I think we've got a lot left to give, and we'll see where it goes. But ride it out as long as we can. I think that's the plan, for me anyway.
Let's hit the time machine, going back 45 years, if we could, to your first album, 1980's Rock Hard, that was released independently. Then you signed to Arista Records, and they released it under the Rods. So what kind of led to the album being rebranded as you signed with Arista?
Mike Bone, initially it was Areola, which was a German label, who wanted to sign the band. Now, obviously, Germany has always been a metal country, been in strong for metal. Arista, as we know, Air Supply, Aretha Franklin, not necessarily, you know, Barry Manilow, not exactly known as a metal label. So in that shakeup, it came time to decide. Arista bought out Areola. So now Arista had to decide which bands to keep. Mike Bone was our A&R person, and he was very influential and was a really big supporter. He convinced them to take us. And of course, there was Crocus from Switzerland who'd had success. We had not had anything out. So Arista picked up Crocus, and they picked up the Rods. So that's how we wound up on Arista, which, you know, in hindsight, was not the best label for us. I mean, I know when it came time to get tour support for the Judas Priest tour, it was posters for Aretha Franklin and those freaking glowing rocks for Air Supply on stage. And, you know, they're like, there was no money for us for anything extra for the Rods because of the glowing rocks and so on. But it was, I think in hindsight, it was good and bad, but we got us out there. I mean, it was important. And Arista UK was very much behind us, unlike Arista, US. Now, Mike Bone was behind us, but as we all know, A&R people are only as good as the rest of the company. So as much as he pushed for us, he wasn't going to get Clive to open up the purse strings unless Clive wanted to open up the purse strings. But Arista UK really did, and that's how we wound up going to UK to record Wild Dogs. And but when they got this album, they made a decision from the Rock Hard album. Mike Bone had 2 songs he wanted us to add to the album, which were Nothing Going On in the City and Ace in the Hole, which Gary sang. And David killed it on Nothing Going On in the City. He took that song and made it his own. But they took off Getting Higher. They removed You Better Run, which was a Rascals cover we did. And there's another song they removed. I can't think of it right now. But so that's how the first album came to be. And the only 2 songs Gary actually played bass on were Ace in the Hole and Nothing Going On in the City. Steve Starmer, our first bass player, is the bass player for the rest of that album.
David, what do you remember about that time on your end as far as, getting this deal with Arista and, you're young guys, you just got signed to this big label, and what was kind of your experience like at that time?
Well, everything Carl said is totally accurate. We were just, at that point in time, all the bands were at the mercy of getting a record label. I mean, it's not like today's world. There was no internet there. There was no making music and putting it out yourself. You were at the mercy of, the record industry, basically. You needed a record label to get an album out. So, it was a real big deal. Wow, we're going to have an album out. And us and probably 99% of all the other bands at the time were willing to give up everything to get an album out. They give up their publishing, they give up all the writing, they give up everything, to get in, because they're artists, and they wanted to get their music out. So, I mean, it was a great thing. I agree that Arista wasn't the best label for us, because we were at the cusp of, the beginning of the first new wave of heavy metal, which was kind of punkish also. So we were grateful for the people that did believe in us, and from the label and everything. And we felt great about the fact that it was a major label that we were going to be on. Not that that means that it's going to be a success or that they're going to give you tour support or any kind of extra benefits, but the album would be on a label, a real label. And it was just a big deal for us, As it turned out, there's a lot of story that goes along with it, but, there were a lot of opportunities for us after that. When the album came out, it took off very quickly, very positively, especially overseas. And, we did the Iron Maiden tour over there for a month in the UK, and got great reviews every night. And then there were a lot of, after that tour, we came back in the States, and we're doing some short stints with Judas Priest. But we had a lot of opportunities to, that were offered to us through AC/DC's management to come over and support them on their European tour, which was, people were paying to get on those tours at the time, and they were asking us to come on the tour. Had to turn it down because the label wouldn't put up the money and the management wouldn't put up the money, and there was no money to do it. Just like at the same time, we got invited to play the Donington Festival, which at the time, you had to be invited to play that festival. We got invited, had to turn it down. No money to fly over there and play. Nobody was. So, we took some burns because if it was a different label, a label that was more in tune with, punk rock that was happening at the time, we might have gotten that, but as it turned out, we didn't, which in turn hurt the progression of the momentum that we had created, from being with Iron Maiden and all that momentum. So anyways, I don't want to go on and on about that, but to answer your question, we did feel great about being on a major label to start.
David, do you work on anything outside of the Rods currently? I know that you've had some solo albums over the years. Are you working on any other projects currently?
No, I kind of like, I worked on solo albums because the Rods weren't doing anything together. And when the Rods decided to not do it anymore for a while, it wasn't because of hostility. It wasn't because of we hated each other, like a lot of other bands. We just got burned out, and that's the way I felt about it. We just needed to get away from it for a while, and quite a few years went by for me anyways. And then, like I said earlier, being a musician and especially someone that writes songs and everything, it never goes away. So I started, I want to play guitar again. When I left, when the Rods stopped playing, I didn't even listen to music. I was driving an old pickup around. I took the radio right out of the truck. I didn't listen to music at all. Just needed to get away from it. But it came back, and I thought, we need, I felt like playing again. So I started doing solo things, and just not soliciting for a label or doing anything like that, just to write a song, record it, put it out. And then one of the albums that came out, Carl had called me and said, geez, I just heard that. And I hadn't seen Carl or Gary in quite a while. And Carl called and said, geez, I just heard your latest thing, and it makes me want to play again. I said, well, why don't we see if we can get together and do do a couple of reunion shows, for the Rods. So we gave Gary a call, and he agreed. Yeah, okay. So we did a couple local, one here in my hometown and one in Ithaca, and by doing those shows, and they were only in small bars, people came from everywhere, because now there was the internet, and it got out there. The Rods are playing here, and people were coming in with albums to sign and everything. So, we looked at, the three of us looked at each other and said, hey, let's keep doing this, and that was the initial reunion of the band. And we just, at that point, decided, like, well, I don't think we decided we're going to make albums. We're just going to play a few more jobs. Let's do it again, And one thing led to another. Carl started writing songs. I started writing songs. We started recording, and it basically started just like the original beginning of the Rods. And at that point, we started recording. We started, we did an album, and we were doing everything that we were doing at the time. Every summer, whether it was 6 or 8 or 10 shows or festivals, we got through directly. Carl was the person that would take the calls and all the messages, and he would get a message from somewhere in Germany or UK or whatever. Well, what do we got to give you guys to come over and do our festival? And then we get together and say, well, geez, we got to have, plane tickets, a place to sleep, and food and transportation. Basically, a lot of these shows that we did over there through the years were basically for expenses. It wasn't like going to make money. There were times when we did get a performance fee, but we wanted to go. We wanted to make these trips, and there were places like Brazil that we never even knew we had fans. Norway, we played Norway, and we played Brazil. I was like, we never thought we had fans in Brazil or Norway, because there was no internet back in the day.
Right.
So, anyways, that's basically how we got back. We just, right now, we take care of, like Carl said, we do everything ourselves, basically.
Carl, I know you have an album out right now on the side with your pre-Rods band. I'm going to butcher the name, Kalakos.
No, I think that was pretty good, actually. Kalakis is the name of the band. And, another band I was in upstate New York with, around the same time David was with Ronnie, was called Raw Meat. So I went from Raw Meat, and then I wound up in a band called Kalakis. Too difficult. One was Raw Meat, which wasn't the prettiest name, and then Kalakis, which was a difficult. But this album, after all these years, we've been working on it for about 2 years. It's the original members, and it's amazing that it's doing as well as it's doing, because the band by this time had for 45 years, we probably had 2 fans, but I know that the first single alone, over 65,000 views on YouTube, and the new single that I'm singing lead on, took them 4 months to convince me to sing lead on it. That song is doing really well, and so it's amazing to see that after all this time, and it's I'm proud of the album, getting good reviews, and it's just a nice thing to have for my my legacy.
I'm actually going to be talking to Lincoln next week about the album.
Oh, good. Link is the best, and he is, Ambassador Lincoln Bloomfield, who is an amazing career in politics, upper echelon. I wound up playing drums on Anthony Blinken's song, our Secretary of State, because Link is friends and works with him, and Andras, another big name in the political arena. So you'll like Link. He has a lot of good stories.
Well, those are all the questions I have for you guys. The new album, Rattle the Cage by the Rods, comes out January 19th through Massacre Records. There it is right there. I'm not bullshitting you. I don't kiss ass. Probably one of your best albums, and I hope you do really well with it. And I want to thank you both for talking to me about it today. And I got to learn a lot more about the Rods, I think.
Hey, we really appreciate the support, George.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
Once again, I want to thank David Rock Feinstein and Carl Canedy of the Rods for coming on the Rock is George podcast. Be sure to check out their latest album, Rattle the Cage, out on January 19th through Massacre Records. Head over to your favorite music streaming platform, take a listen to what's available. If you like what you hear, buy a physical copy of the album, support the artist. For all things The Rods, head over to their official website, therods.com. I also want to thank Dustin Hardman of Hardman Promotions and Massacre Records for making this interview possible. You've been great. I've been George Dionne. Discover your next favorite artist on the Rock is George podcast.